Happy Wednesday, everybody. Welcome to another edition of Comeback Sports. Yes, it's a weekly sports talk show. We bring you 10 sports topics, and we talk about all of them across the globe, across the country. A lot of NFL stuff we got going on today, a lot of F1 as usual, a little baseball, a little college football as well. A lot to get to today. Folks, I am your host, Pat the Shot Caller Flaherty, and as always, I got my co-host, Brennan the Coach Perry. Brennan, how we doing today, buddy?
Doing good on another Wednesday here on Comeback Sports, and looking forward to diving into these 10 topics, especially obviously the Monza mayhem crash between Lewis Hamilton and Max Verstappen.
Yeah, big influence. That crash had a lot of influence over that race over the weekend. We'll be getting into that at some point today. Folks, as always, you can always follow us on our social media accounts. Right at the bottom of the screen is Brandon and I's Twitter handles. So you can follow us on Twitter. We give you updates about which topics we'll be covering. The links to the live stream is always there. But of course, if you're watching us on YouTube, make sure you subscribe to the Comeback Sports YouTube channel. You do that, and all our content from the show will feed right into that Comeback Sports channel. So make sure you check that out, folks. And then finally, at the top of our screen, we have a call-in number. You can check out the call-in number and call into our show and actually give your opinion about some of this stuff, whether it's any type of sports that we're talking about, especially F1, baseball, football, all good stuff. And then also, folks, we're going to try to bring up any kind of chats you put in the live chat on YouTube. So if you put anything in the live chat, whether it's an opinion, a question, we're going to try to get to it for you at some point tonight, just to kind of keep things moving. And we really appreciate anybody who gets in there in the live chat as well. We appreciate all of our followers here on Comeback Sports. First topic, though, we're going to get things going with the Patriots weekend. This past weekend for the NFL across the board. It was opening weekend for the National Football League and for the Patriots. Brandon, as a Patriots fan, disappointed that they lost a division game, but I think there were a lot of good things to come out of this game if you're a Patriots fan, if you're the Patriots team, despite the fact they didn't get the loss there late against the Dolphins. What did you think about their loss to Miami on Sunday?
Well, it was tough to watch. I will say that, as in taking the L that late in the game. Because, obviously they had really done enough to get the win there. And especially if they could have really maybe executed a couple of more times, especially on that drive late, obviously, when they fumbled the ball and turned the ball over, that was pretty much the game. But I don't know. I don't know. It's one of those things where it's bittersweet for me, honestly. I was happy to see that they were in position to win the game late and that Mac Jones played pretty good. I'd say made minimal rookie mistakes, because obviously he did make some big mistakes in the game, but it's expected for a rookie in his first start. But then the other side of me is just thinking man, the offense looked just as pedestrian as it did last season and didn't put up enough points to even be able to win the game. So that's what concerns me a lot going forward. But I will say Mac Jones did a great job even addressing that himself, saying, obviously, we need to score more touchdowns, and we will going forward. So I think that's one of those things where I know I'm certainly going to be holding him to his words there, because the offense has to put up more points on the board to be able to win. But another good sign was the defense played amazing and really kept us in the game a lot. And I guess you could say both defenses really played well for the Miami Dolphins. So it was a defensive game across the board. But I think there was a lot of good things to take from Mac Jones' first outing here, but a lot of bad things as well. I know in the first, I believe it was either the first or second quarter there, I texted you and producer Ben being like, that's a rookie mistake that he cannot do. And that was when he was getting sacked. He turned around and just looked to dump the ball in reverse, which anybody that knows American football, that is a lateral, and it is considered a fumble, and it's considered a live ball. Luckily, his teammates knew what was going on. They covered the ball. But I think one of the biggest things that Mac Jones has got to learn, and he's got to learn it quick, is when to be able to just say, hey, the play's over. I've got to take a sack here and hold on to the ball, and when to look to continue the play. So he's got to really learn that quick, and hopefully he's getting an earful about it from Bill Belichick, which you wouldn't doubt me. But on top of that, like I said, Damian Harris, that fumble was huge late in the game. And I always tell my running backs, as a running back, you are worth zero value if you can't hold on and protect the ball. So I think that's one of those things that the offense has got to clean up, and they got to put more points on the board. But yet there was a lot of good things to take from this game, a lot of bad things, and obviously taking the loss was no good. But let's see what they do against the Jets in week 2.
Yeah, losing to a division opponent in a game that I think they're better than the Dolphins. Just watching that game, I think the Patriots have more talent than the Dolphins do this year. I don't think the same could have been said for last year, but this year I do, which is kind of why I'm optimistic. Mac Jones, like you mentioned, that fumble that he had, that really took them out of field goal range on that drive too. And it was a kind of just a weird play. I think he just lost where he was in the field, and then he just saw Jonnu Smith, so he just tried to dump it off and didn't realize Jonnu Smith was actually behind him on the play. I think he thought he just didn't know which direction he was in. And again, that's a rookie mistake, like you mentioned. But what I liked about Mac Jones was that he made that kind of crazy, almost embarrassing play, then comes right back, and it seemed like he got better as the game went along. And they also opened up the playbook a little bit more as the game went along, which is one of the reasons why I think the offense didn't put up as many points. The other thing, too, is, Mac Jones's fumble, even though they recovered it, took him out of field goal range. That's 3 points off the board.
Yep.
Ramondre Stevenson fumble gives it back to the Dolphins. I think the Dolphins scored on the next possession, too, if I remember, after recovering Stevenson's fumble. So there's possible points off the board there. And then you have Harris driving down the field, and then he fumbles at, the 11-yard line. So, that they were at least going to score 3, if not a touchdown. So, I think if you don't have 3 turnovers, let's say you have 1 or 2 turnovers and don't have 3, 1 game, I think, and then 2, you're putting up more points. But like I said before, too, I think the Patriots, in the first half especially, they're like, we do have a rookie quarterback here. I mean, as good as Mac Jones has done picking up the offense, he's still a rookie. This is still his game. And even as a Patriots fan, who I've been very impressed with Mac Jones over training camp and in the preseason, but he still hadn't played his first NFL game against a pretty good defense. This isn't, the best defense in the NFL, but I think it's the top 10 defense. You're talking about the Dolphins. And he played very well, especially later on in the second half. The other thing I like, too, was the second half is when they really started to get the tight ends involved. The 2 tight ends, they were the high-priced guys, Jonnu Smith, Hunter Henry. Hunter Henry, I don't think, caught a pass in the first half. They got him and Jonnu Smith involved a little bit more in the second half. You really saw the offense move well. They were converting third downs. I think they were like 11 for 16 on third down. So I actually took a lot of good things out of it. All the problems they had with the 3 turnovers or the 2 turnovers and the fumble by Mac that they got back. Take that, and then they had a ton of stupid penalties. I mean, Judon had a penalty and a punt return that cost them some yardage. I know one of the offensive linemen had a bad penalty where it was sort of like it was a block in the back, but the play was already by him, and it just like a lot of those penalties that are fixable, like this week. When you don't have enough talent, you can't fix that unless you go acquire more talent. But they have the talent, I think. The last thing I'll say too that I was very encouraged by was another high-priced free agent that they signed, and that's Nelson Agholor. I wasn't sure if he was worth the money that they spent, and we'll see throughout the season if that's the case. But if the first game's any indicator, they spent money the right way. He had 5 catches, 72 yards, and a touchdown, and they didn't even throw the ball down the field, that much. They didn't throw the deep ball that much, but he had some nice right side. Mac threw some nice passes to him, including the touchdown pass, even though he's wide open, but he put it right on the money. He's getting separation. It seems like Agholor is that deep threat, or at least that receiver on the outside that can get separation, has the speed, and the Patriots have needed that. So far, so good with him, and I am optimistic. They should have won against the Dolphins, but I'm optimistic about this team.
Yeah, no, I'm still optimistic. We got to see what happens here in week 2, and I think that'll show us a lot against a Jets team that is, pretty much, I don't know, not evenly matched, because I think the Patriots are much better. But I think that's one of those things when you're going up against a team that is not as good as you. That's the time you really need to just, get the work done and shine. So we'll see what they do in week 2. I think that will show us a lot and tell us a lot about this team. But I also think, turnovers are huge, especially in any game, whether any level, whether it be Pop Warner, high school, college, or the pros. If you turn the ball over that much, you're going to give the other team that many more opportunities to be able to put up points. And so I think that was really one of those things where it was a close game and turnovers ended up being a lot in the end. And it really hurt the Patriots, obviously, with that final turnover that pretty much ended the game for them. And they were definitely on a drive that was probably going to score a touchdown at that point. It felt like that, at least. The momentum was there. Mac Jones was doing a great job of leading that drive, which, especially late in the game, to have your rookie quarterback really take charge like that, that was a really good sight to see. Because he led that drive and did everything he needed to do, and he wasn't the one who made the mistake. Damian Harris was, and I think obviously he's going to be paying for that going forward. As we all know, Bill Belichick doesn't like backs that put the ball on the ground. So I'm curious to see what happens with him in week 2 as well. But Xavier Howard for the Miami Dolphins played amazing. This is another high-paid guy on a good defense. He was the one that forced one of those fumbles, and then he also recovered the fumble as well. So I just had to, highlight that as well, so people aren't saying we're complete homers, because I love Xavier Howard. I like the way he plays. But I definitely want to see the Pats bounce back here. And just quickly before we bounce on, I love that he was going to Jonnu Smith in the second half. But, man, I wish he went to him more. I have him on my fantasy team. And I also feel like an idiot because I should have played Rob Gronkowski over Jonnu Smith. So there goes the homer play right there. But we'll have to see, like I said, what happens with the Jets in week 2. With the Patriots and the Jets in week 2. I'm sure we'll be covering it. But let's move on tonight to another great topic, okay? And that's the Packers, baby. Aaron Rodgers and the Packers. And this is a great headline. I think producer Ben or even you, Pat, came up with it. And that's no Pack, no. And we also know that's a little play off the famous Go Pack Go. But there wasn't much go there in week 1 for Aaron Rodgers and the Green Bay Packers.
No, they weren't going anywhere. They were stuck in mud. I mean, I think, they lost to the Saints 38-3. And the Saints have a good defense. Jameis Winston, he might be in – I don't think – we might not have talked about this enough. He might be in the perfect situation to kind of rein in his turnover-happy kind of style, and just enough where Sean Payton, who still likes to throw the ball down the field, and Winston does too, he might be in the perfect place to kind of have the best of both worlds there. It's only one game, but – Jameis Winston didn't throw for a ton of yards. I think he only threw for like 150 yards, but had 5 touchdowns, did what he needed to do. The Saints defense is good. They still have a ton of good players on that side of the ball. They were good last year. They're good again this year. But the Packers weren't ready to play this game. I think that's plain and simple. And now you have to question, was everything that went on with Aaron Rodgers in the offseason, the fact that Rodgers was not there in minicamp, the fact that Rodgers came to training camp kind of late, is there a sort of hangover effect from that to this first game? I mean, was Aaron Rodgers ready to play? Did he get enough reps in the offseason? I know that's crazy to say about a future Hall of Famer who's still, he's the MVP of the league last year, but he didn't look right either. He was, I think it was 15 for 28, 133 yards and 2 interceptions. I mean, he just didn't play well against a good defense. But again, it just seemed like they weren't ready to go. And if you're the Packers right now, and you remember what happened last season in the NFC Championship game, how you were at home and you lost to the Bucs, and everybody thought the Packers were going to go to the Super Bowl. They go for the field goal late in the game, and they should be chomping at the bit to start this season. And they just didn't seem like they were ready to go, and that they even wanted to be out there. So, I mean, for this Packers team, I think they'll bounce back in week 2, but just surprising effort, on top of the score. I'm just surprised that they got throttled this much by the Saints.
I think you're 100% correct that, Aaron Rodgers wasn't ready to play, but I'm not blaming him. I'm blaming the general manager in the front office for this debacle of a situation that they created in the offseason the last 2 years that has put Aaron Rodgers in this situation where he said he didn't even want to play for the team. And then they had to, jump through hoops to even get him to sign this 1-year contract to come back. And we all know it's just a 1-year contract, and he's moving on next year to probably a new team. And I don't know if you've seen it, but just over the last few days or maybe even the last week, he did an interview with NFL Fox and really flat out came out and said, they drafted a quarterback. They drafted a young quarterback, and they were ready to replace me, and now I'm ready to move on. And, it's really one of those things where he finally came out and said it. beyond some of the other interviews that he's had where he's flat out said he was unhappy with the moves that the general managers made, or, you know, the attitude and the treatment of veteran players and stuff like that. So he's been very vocal and very honest in his situation. But I think, you know, inevitably that whole, you know, whirlwind tornado of a situation that was created did not obviously help this football team. And it is a worst case scenario right now because they looked horrible there in week 1. I do think obviously this team will bounce back. They'll get better as the season goes on. I think Aaron Rodgers is obviously going to play a lot better. He doesn't want people questioning his capabilities and also his will to play at this point, you know, especially moving on to a new team. But I do think, you know, this team will bounce back. But I think, you know, the situation that was created in the offseason, this is what you get from it right now, that, you know, Aaron Rodgers wasn't ready to play in the offseason, didn't report to camp early enough, didn't play many reps, like you said, in the preseason. And now he was kind of getting his preseason reps out in a game that actually mattered, which was a week 1 game in the NFL. And as we know, all these games matter extremely a lot in the NFL when we're talking about playoff seeding or even making the playoffs. And granted, we do have 17 games this year, which is obviously historic, but still, it's not one of those things where you don't want to be like, hey, we're going to take 5 or 6 games to kind of bounce out of this and get ready, because at that point you will be out of playoff contention because nobody's going to go on a run there, and injuries are going to happen, among other things. Like, look at the Baltimore Ravens and what they're having to deal with. So it's just really one of those things where clearly I think the whole team wasn't ready to play. Obviously, their leader wasn't ready to play. But like I said, I'm blaming the general manager and the front office for this situation that's been created.
Yeah, I hear you on that. I do think that, you know, the cupboard is not bare for Aaron Rodgers. I mean, they have probably the best wide receiver, one of the best wide receivers in the league, in Devontae Adams. They had a couple of other solid receivers around him in Vantez Scantling. They signed Randall Cobb in the offseason, the guy that Aaron Rodgers really wanted because they used to be teammates a few years ago. You know, yep. They could probably use another dynamic tight end, although Tanyan's pretty good. Aaron Jones is a top 10 running back in the NFL. I mean, and they have a good defense. So, you know, it's not like, you know, in Tom Brady's last season with the Patriots, one of the things he was upset about was that, you know, they tried to trade Gronk a couple of years before, then Gronk retired. They just had Edelman, and they didn't really, you know, they drafted N'Keal Harry. He was injured for most of that season. They traded for Mohamed Sanu. He didn't work out. They just didn't have guys. They got Antonio Brown, and that whole thing blew up in their face. So they didn't really acquire weapons for Brady. With Rodgers, you know, the guy was there. All his guys are there. He has guys to throw to, and he has a good defense. So, you know, I think he's in position to have a good season, and then, you know, whatever happens next year, he'll be out of there. So, you know, on the one hand, I understand why he's upset about the Jordan Love thing, just like Brady probably wasn't too happy about the Jimmy Garoppolo thing. But, you know, he has a team around him in place to go win a Super Bowl. So I think that he's got to kind of knuckle down here and understand that he's got one more season as a Packer, and you got to kind of figure it out. Moving on to topic number 3, you mentioned, Brandon, the Ravens, who have had just a rough few weeks with the players that they've lost for the season, including J.K. Dobbins, and then Gus Edwards, the second string running back, who would have been, you know, the lead guy. And in the same practice, they have Marcus Peters tear his ACL and be lost the season. So those are 3 very important players they lose for the season. And then on Monday Night Football, they lose a heartbreaker in overtime to the Raiders at Vegas. Brennan, what did you think about this crazy game?
Well, for the Ravens, I know they talk about the injury bug, but man, I've got to tell you, in all the history that I've seen of the NFL, I've never seen the injury bug hit this hard, this early, especially to one position group of one team. I mean, they basically had their whole running back group decimated from injury within like a week or two. And this isn't like stretched out over 6 weeks where, you know, you got one guy that can play. No, they lost a couple running backs within a week. And then on top of that, in the same day, the guy that they thought was going to replace their top running back, J.K. Dobbins, right, he blows out his ACL. That's Gus Edwards in practice. The worst time you want to basically get an injury like that is in a non-competitive situation. And then on top of that same practice, their number 1 cornerback, Marcus Peters, goes down with basically the same injury, another season-ending ACL injury. So talk about just, bad luck going around that locker room. If I'm Harbaugh, I'm saying, get some sage up in here. Let's burn some sage. Like, let's do some sort of lucky dance. Like, let's not have practice for a day and do something to get rid of this bad juju that's going around our facility right now, and the injury bug, and just kind of kill that thing right now, because it is really hurting this team. And I think inevitably it did hurt them in week 1 here against the Raiders. I will say Latavius Murray looked pretty good for coming in and basically only being signed basically hours before the game started, and coming in and running pretty well off just, minimal carries. But on top of that, to basically shore up that position, they've signed up a pretty impressive practice squad, and it is historical, we'll say, because it's Devontae Freeman and Le'Veon Bell. But I still think those guys, especially Le'Veon Bell, has a lot left in his tank and can play NFL football. Devontae Freeman, I do think that's questionable how much he does have left in the tank. But I think inevitably Le'Veon Bell is going to find his way onto the active roster here for the Baltimore Ravens and get some downs played. But I think Latavius Murray is going to be their, star back going forward here. And he's just coming off a historically best season last year for him, for the Saints. And the Saints didn't want to pay him some money, so he became a free agent. And I think this was luck for the Baltimore Ravens, considering what just happened to their running back group, to have a guy coming off, a career best year available as a free agent so they could scoop him up. So I do think that's inevitably a little silver lining in the cloud for the Baltimore Ravens. But, man, this injury bug is hitting them hard, and it is going to be something that they're going to have to deal with now throughout the whole season, with that injury bug, with just their running backs, but obviously now with Marcus Peters, their number 1 cornerback as well. So it's just really one of those things. They played the Raiders tough, and they had a chance to win. But I don't know. It's just really one of those things. I do think that inevitably that bad juju that was going around, and just, all the injuries that they were having to face and all that uphill that they were having to battle, definitely at least hurt them here in week 1. So this is another team that I'm looking to see them bounce back in week 2. But inevitably, it's crazy because they have to play Kansas City week 2. So I think they're up for a big test in week 2, but we will see how they're ready to face that challenge.
Yeah, I mean, you think about the Ravens and going up against the Raiders, and you think, the Ravens have more talent. They've had a better pedigree for success over the last decade and even longer. And then you look at how many guys they've lost, and J.K. Dobbins and Gus Edwards and Marcus Peters. They have I believe Jimmy Smith, their second corner, also did not play. I think he had a sprained ankle in training camp and didn't play on Sunday. Even though he's sort of back, he kind of wasn't ready to go. So you got Marlon Humphreys, one of the best corners in the league. But then after that, your next 2 corners are down. And then you go up against a Raiders team who they were having Humphrey play a lot on Darren Waller in the second half. Waller still had 10 catches for 130-something yards.
Yep.
He had a huge game. But, you have this Raiders team who probably should have scored in their first possession of overtime. And then they had that crazy interception in the end zone. Ravens fumble it on the next possession. Raiders get it back. First play, wide open receiver streaking down the seam for a touchdown. And it's just you wonder if Marcus Peters was there, would the coverage have been, more in sync in the secondary, because you have your second and third corners out, and then your fourth and fifth corners are now promoted to your second and third corners. And then when you have your top 2 running backs out, then your third and fourth running backs are in there. Latavius Murray, like you mentioned, pretty reliable, but now you have a bunch of these pieces that were just thrown together because of all these injuries. And that's hard to do, especially in week 1 when you haven't played a game in the season yet. So I just think with all this, it's not necessarily that you're losing a certain amount of running backs. It's that when one of your top players goes out of a position, or your second player goes out of a position, the third stringer, is pretty good as a third stringer, but then they come up to a second stringer and they're not always that good. So you have somebody playing at a higher level than they are capable of. That's when those kind of mistakes happen. And I think that's what happened with the Raiders on Monday night. Crazy game. One a very entertaining Monday Night Football game. But I think the Ravens kind of blew that one too. And then again, if you don't have that running game, that's a lot on Lamar Jackson, because he's obviously going to run the ball along with being the team's quarterback and throwing the ball downfield. And it looked like they tried to get Marquise Brown a little bit more involved, which I like to see. He's a guy that can really create some explosive plays for them. But without those running backs, they're going to lean heavily on Lamar Jackson. But again, it's good that Le'Veon Bell and Monte Freeman and Latavius Murray are your stable of running backs, because you got three pretty good players there.
Yeah, you still got some good players to go to, luckily. And like I said, I think that might be maybe their saving grace, especially once Murray does learn the playbook a little bit more and gets a little bit more in tune with Lamar Jackson. I think that'll help them out a lot. But this goes to show, even at any level, and I've said this on many of subjects, whether it be Pop Warner or high school or college or the NFL, that depth is also key. You got to have depth, and it plays out, especially in a game that's so violent and injuries happen. But I think Lamar Jackson looked amazing that night, and he played pretty good, especially for week 1. I'm really looking to see what he can do in the matchup against Patrick Mahomes in week 2. And just quickly, a guy that we've talked about previously on the show, even did a whole segment on him, Carl Nassib. He was the guy who made that fumble hit and forced the fumble there in overtime on Lamar Jackson and made the play to basically, set up his team to get the win. So big shout out to Carl for making that fumble hit on Lamar. But like I said, Lamar's face at the end of that game told me a lot, that he was really shocked that they just lost this game and that he's going to come out and do some big things over the next few weeks. So I'm looking forward to that. But also, I think we've got to talk about it maybe at the end with a quick, bonus subject at the end. And that's the Manning Monday night cast from Monday Night Football. I enjoyed watching that. It was absolutely amazing. I did not watch the regular game cast. I watched 100% of the Manning cast for Monday Night Football, and I thought that was amazing. But we'll talk about that at the end, hopefully, because that's a weird little bonus subject. But let's move on to my team. Honestly, this is my number one college football team I've loved since I was a little kid. That's the Florida State Seminoles. Boy, are they starting off horrible, looking absolutely horrible right now. And it was really one of those things where against Notre Dame, they put up a great fight. I think everybody was saying, hey, man, this team might have a good season. Then they come out and lay a dud to Jacksonville State, especially with a late game error to basically give up the game. And now at this point, they're 0-2, and there's a lot of questions to be asked.
Oh, yeah, no question. I mean, how quickly things can turn from one week to the next in college football, where you have, like you mentioned, a solid performance against Notre Dame. They were at home, but they were playing a team that has more talent, and right now program is in better shape than Florida State, at least a little bit. And they put up a good fight. There was a point in that Notre Dame game where I think Notre Dame was up 2 touchdowns, and Florida State could have given up, and they didn't. And then now you see this week they lose to Jacksonville State. And you're thinking to yourself, like, would this have ever happened in the Bobby Bowden era? And unfortunately with Florida State, they just lost Bobby Bowden. The season's, they're now 0-2 on the season. And now Mike Norvell is in his second year as head coach. I think I read some articles where they're like, the honeymoon's over. And yeah, it is, and now you're in the ACC, and, next week you're playing, or this upcoming week, they're playing Wake Forest, who's not a great football team, who's not a great football program, but they contend in the ACC, and right now they're 2-0. So it's not like they got a cupcake this week after losing to what probably should have been a cupcake against Jacksonville State. So, Florida State's just in a weird place right now. I mean, you and I have talked about how we remember back in the day when they were one of the more dominant programs, and Peter Warwick, and even before that, with some of the Charlie Ward and guys like that. I mean, and now it's flipped, and they're in such a strain. Even with Jimbo Fisher, they had some very good teams where they were going 10-2, 9-3, competing in the ACC championship once in a while, competing for the top spot in the ACC, and just losing out to them. And now that's not the case. They just seem like they're just so out of sorts. And yeah, I don't know. I mean, I know you even tweeted about a picture after the Florida State game, which I'm sure you're going to want to talk about, but it just doesn't look the same. There just doesn't seem to be that same passion for Florida State football like there was, just a few years ago.
Oh, man, he hit me with that picture immediately. Producer Ben knows it because he's following my tweets. That has pissed me off, to say the least, so much. And honestly, it disgusts me. And I know I'm going to take some flack about this from some fans and maybe some lovebirds out there. But it's just really one of those things where I even tweeted about it that, I think the coach needs to be fired at this point, because he is just basically creating a program where losing is acceptable. And the product that was just put out on the field, there was no pride taken in it, because this guy was happy enough to go ahead and create a lifetime memory of a marriage proposal right while Jacksonville State was celebrating in the other end zone, a win that they just had. And we're talking about a major win against a Florida State program. Look, they're also planting the flag on your field, and now you're bending knee to get married in the other end zone. It's just a disgrace, honestly, to college football and to competitive sports in general. Like I said, take some pride in what you're doing. And the player's name is Brady Scott in general. Brady Scott, I personally think you're a clown. He's a backup at this point. And I also tweeted out, that he's got a losing mentality. And this is clear that losing is acceptable to him. He didn't care about and have any pride or respect about what he just put on the field or what his teammates put on the field or the product that was put out there for a top program, right? I don't know. I'm just so disgusted. And like I said, the only thing I can think is that Mike Norvell has made losing acceptable to these players and that they see no repercussion in basically losing a football game at this point. And I know people are going to say, oh, he had his family there and it was probably planned ahead of time. And well, guess what? So was the game against Jacksonville State. That was planned ahead of time as well. It was supposed to be a game they were supposed to win. I get it. And so that's probably why he picked that game. But guess what? When Jacksonville State scores the last second touchdown and beats your team, you hold that thing in your pocket. You hold that thing in your pocket for a W later in the season. Man, because it's just disgusting. You look like an idiot that you're doing a marriage proposal. And he's taken plenty of bad flack for it, which I think he deserves. And the team's taken plenty of bad flack for it, which I think he deserves. But I think Mike Norvell, the coach, deserves a lot of bad credit here. For these last 2 years, I've seen really nothing good from Florida State football. The only thing good I've seen from them was that game against Notre Dame in week 1. Where they actually put up a fight, maybe had a chance of sniffing like a team of old from Florida State, where you're like, man, they've got some talent here. They're playing good on offense. They're playing good on defense. They're putting up a fight. They're in the game, possession after possession. And then they turn around to lose to a team, Jacksonville State, a team that nobody's ever heard of, really, a team that you clearly scheduled as a cupcake to get your season started. And now you're 0-2. I think the calls for Mike Norvell to be fired are rightfully so at this point. And like I said, people calling Brady Scott a clown, I also think those are rightful calls as well. And I'm one of those guys. So it's just sad for a team like Florida State to be in shambles right now and to be dealing with all this bad publicity and bad press. And all you can do from that is move on and create a new program. And to do that, you've got to fire the coach and move on. And I'll name some other great players. And guess what? One of them should be the next coach of Florida State football. That's Coach Deion Sanders. I think Coach Deion Sanders, they should make every play to get Coach Deion Primetime Sanders to come over and fix this program, a program that we all know he loves, that he played for, that Warwick Dunn played for, that Derek Brooks played for, Chris Wenke, Lavernius Coles, you named Peter Warwick. There's endless amounts of guys that played for this team that are just, basically college Hall of Famers and have earned the respect of all college football fans over the last 3 or 4 decades. So right now, this team just looks horrible and in shambles. So I'd like Coach Norvell to be fired. I'd like them to hire Coach Deion Sanders to fix this program and get it back in line. But he's got a lot of work to do. But I'm not even sure he wants to accept his job in the situation that he's in right now. But just quickly, before I pass it to you, going back to that stupid marriage proposal, I even saw other Florida State players, former players, basically saying that if he tried that BS in my era, guys would have went over there and smacked the ring out of his hand. So honestly, that just tells you about how much Florida State football means to people and over the lifetime here. And like I said, I've been watching this team since I was 6 or 7 years old. So that's three decades I've been watching Florida State football, longer than this turd's been alive that's bending a knee in the end zone. So it's just really one of those things where I think Florida State football has a lot to do to get back to the top of the mountain, and hopefully they'll start working on it soon.
Yeah, if I'm Coach Norvell, I hope the player went up to him before the game, or at least during the week, and said, Coach, I'm planning on doing this. Do you mind if I do this? Because and if I'm the coach, I'm saying, okay, but we better win. If we don't win, you're putting that thing away. Because I'd be in the same position. I'd be like, what are you doing? We just lost to a CS team, and we're friggin' Florida State. Like we used to be the class of the ACC. Why did you come to the school if you were going to lose to Jacksonville State? So yeah, I'm with you. I mean, if the coach just allowed this to happen, I mean, I'm sure he wasn't even thinking about it when the kid was doing it, but I hope he had a conversation with the player during the week, and the kid just didn't do it on a whim and not ask anybody, because that's kind of disrespectful to the rest of the team too. When something like that happens, if your whole family's there, that's the chance you take when you propose at a game, that's live and right after the game do it. I mean, that's the whole thing. It's like when somebody proposes at like Fenway Park, and if the girl says no, too bad it's on the Jumbotron. That's your fault. Same thing, So that's how I feel about it. Brandon, go ahead.
Yeah, just quickly before I pass it back to you, I think it's one of those things, like you said, why'd you come to Florida State football? You clearly came because of the history, right? And the other thing that I said in that tweet was winning and losing matters at Florida State and for Florida State football, just like it does for Notre Dame football or USC. Obviously, we just seen them fire their coach. So it matters. And at that point, I just didn't see any, like I said, pride or respect for the product that was just put out on the field. And I just seen a guy that was willing to accept losing at that point.
Yeah, no question. And that's, you don't want to build, it's all about building programs in college football, and you don't want to breed that kind of atmosphere in college football. That is not a good thing to have. We're going to move on to topic number 5. We're going to stay in college football. Crazy scene at the U football stadium over the weekend. Miami Hurricanes had a cat that was dangling from the stadium, and some fans of this game helped out, Brandon. This was actually a really cool image to see over the weekend.
Yeah, I mean, this cat was dangling from the upper deck. I mean, look at this. You can see it live here, dangling from the upper deck. And then he's like, all right, I'm going to use my acrobats here, and I'm just going to let go. But then the couple that was underneath them, they are season ticket holders at the University of Miami. They're there every game. They also bring an American flag with them every game, and they drape it over the front of where their seats are. So they said they looked up, they saw the cat. They said, hey, he's either going to drop on us or we got to try to catch him. So they took the American flag and they did it at an appropriate time. You can see them underneath there kind of creating this little fireman net. And it was just enough to basically stop his momentum. And we all know how cats, have this amazing ability to basically land on their feet. Well, he righted himself when he was falling, but the flag kind of stops his momentum. And then he lands, and he lands safe, and he's alive. So I've inevitably got to think this guy used up at least 2 or 3 of his lives, right? Maybe more here. So he can't be doing this much more. But there's a lot of questions. I know we see a lot of, animals, whether they be like, the bees in Major League Baseball games, squirrels. Yep. There's been, the NFL cat that came on Monday Night Football, the black cat, and people were saying he could have rushed for 150 yards. Well, this is now the college football cat who wants to be like a gymnast and an acrobat. But like I said, we see this a lot, but I think this is the first time we've seen one of them dangling from the upper decks, potentially about to lose his life, and the fans basically catch him. And I'll tell you what, the whole stadium went crazy once they held him up and they showed that he wasn't hurt and that he was still alive. So, I mean, I've still got some questions like, where's the cat now? Hopefully, people kept him safe and turned him in to the authorities so he could get, some help going forward. But I've got to think, like, why was he in the stadium, man? It's crazy. And just quickly before I toss it to you, we're going to talk about F1 later at Imola in Italy at the Imola track. They have the Imola cat, and the Imola cat basically, was basically walking around the paddock, and nobody knew whose cat it was. And it ended up in the Mercedes garage. But the rumor was that there's a house close to the track in Imola, and that this cat was belonging to the track. And he knows his way around the tracks. So he just made his way to the paddock, happened to be during the F1 weekend. But it's just really one of those things. This is the same thing. This cat, clearly, he knows his way around the stadium, but maybe not well enough because he got himself on the edge of the upper deck there. But, man, what a crazy situation. But super glad to see that he was not hurt in that fall. And I love the title here, College Football Cat. I think this is going to be big for all season. Yeah,
I mean, like, how did he get out to the upper deck is what I want to know. Anytime you mention all the animals that have been on the field, which I get because you kind of sneak through, in the foundation, or there's maybe like some kind of like water pipe or something that the animals go through. How did the cat get all the way up there is what I want to know. And then how did it get to that low where they were just hanging, right. Which was crazy. But it was, you know what, it's weird. It's a weird looking thing to see during a college football game. But it sounds cheesy, but to a couple with the American flag on 9/11, hold this flag out and catch the cat. And it's just like, it's a little weird, but that was pretty cool. That was pretty cool to see on that day in particular. And the whole place exploded, which is awesome. Which is the best part about the fact that we're now back watching live sports in stadiums. These types of things, which nobody's there to see this type of thing at a game. When something like this happens, the whole crowd erupts, and that's really cool. I mean, stadiums and, a young kid catches a foul ball and everybody goes nuts, or, something like that happens in the stands and people go nuts along with going crazy for what's happening in the game. So this is really cool. This is social media, just a feeding frenzy on social media, this thing bopping around everywhere. But yeah, really, really funny thing to happen in Miami. Glad the cat's okay. I hope whoever owns that cat or did before the cat did this doesn't own the cat anymore, because clearly they don't know where the cat is at all times, which is crazy. Take care of your cat.
Dude, it's crazy. It's crazy that even happened. I mean, I think they know he should belong to the team at this point, and they need him. But I think it's one of those things where the fans were paying more attention to that because the University of Miami's hurt, and obviously they got rolled up by Alabama in week 1, and I don't even know what happened there in week 2 here. But I think more people were just eyes on this cat, college football cat, and seeing what was going to happen there. But I think you bring up a great point just before we move on. What would, if this had happened like last season with no fans in the stadium, he would have just been dangling there. He might have fell to his death, or would have, with the security have stepped in and been like, we got to save this feline, man. It's just good luck. But, just a crazy story there. And like you said, we're super happy that college football cat is good to go. And like I said, he might be the next star of college football. Hopefully he is. But let's move on. Let's move on to F1 here. And hey, if you're new here tonight, if you're new to our show, give us a like here, give us a follow. Give us a follow on Twitter as well, or give us a call in at the number that producer Ben's going to pop up here that you can call in the show, because I know these F1 topics are going to bring a lot of passion out of a lot of people. So, hey, we want to hear you. This is an interactive sports show. So give us a follow here. Give us a like on Comeback Sports and chime in here. Like I said, this is an interactive opinion show. So we want to hear your opinion as well. But let's move on tonight to topic number 6, and that's McLaren Mighty in Monza, or the Mighty McLaren at Monza, however you want to say it. But they were dominating here at the Italian Grand Prix.
No question. And you saw, at the end of the race, Daniel Riccardo, I think he led for most of the race, and really just put together a nice drive for McLaren. And I think it was a couple of weeks ago, we were talking about disappointments this year in F1, and Daniel Ricciardo I know he's on the top of my list, and I think you agree with me as well. Everybody likes Daniel Ricciardo. He's a character. He's great on Drive to Survive. He's a charismatic guy. He's really good with the fans. And he's come into F1. He's got several, I think this was his 8th win in his career. But he's come in with a lot of fanfare over the past 5 years. He's bounced around. He's now in his third. He's now on his third team in 5 years, I believe, or even 4 years, because he spent time with Red Bull, then with Renault, and now with McLaren. And he keeps signing these new deals, and you're like, when is this guy going to actually produce? And finally he puts together an awesome race. I don't think he has finished. I mean, he didn't finish better than 5th this year until Sunday. So now he's putting together, a first place win. It's just great to see. And then you have Landon Norris, his teammate, finishing 2nd. So McLaren is like probably over the moon right now. I think this is the first time McLaren's gotten top spot in a Grand Prix since 2012. I think I read they haven't won a first place, gotten first place in a race in a long time, I think. Yep. And it's the first time that they've gotten both their teammates in the top 2 in like 20 years or something like that. So very rare to see that. And I'm sure some of it, people are going to say, was aided by the fact that the 2 top drivers on the grid got in a crash early. But nobody year and see that's what would happen. I mean, Riccardo had a great drive, and so did Landon Norris, and McLaren obviously was so happy about this. And it's Riccardo's first win since Monaco in 2018. So he had a slump, saying how much of a disappointment he is this year. With Renault, he wasn't like lighting up the world either. I know the car probably wasn't as good there as he now has with McLaren, but it's good to see Riccardo kind of back on top. He really needed this, I think, or else this streak could have ended at the end of the year where he might not have gotten a podium all season long. And then you're saying, what's going on with Daniel Ricciardo? So big win for him, big win for McLaren.
Yeah, man. I mean, quickly, you talked about how we talked about, first half season disappointments, and he was on both of our lists. But I want to toot my own horn because I also said that he's going to bounce back. He's going to get a win. So go back and watch that clip. And producer Ben, he's not going to bring it up for you here now, but I guarantee you he's going to tag it at the end of this clip for you to be able to watch it. And that's basically that I said he was going to bounce back. I knew he had the capabilities, and I believed him. He's one of my favorite drivers, so I knew this was going to happen. So I was extremely excited to see him get the win at the Italian Grand Prix, and I think he deserved it, man. Right from the start, had an amazing start off the line, past Max Verstappen with some great action off the start into turn one, and basically didn't look back after that. Just led the whole race after that. And yeah, you can bring up how obviously Verstappen and Lewis Hamilton came together and they were taken out of the race. So the two championship foes and maybe his number one contenders to basically challenge him for that race were gone. But he still had a masterful drive to be able to not only basically race himself up there. And remember, this was a sprint race weekend. So he had himself a great job, did himself a great job in the sprint race to be able to put himself on the front row and also earn himself an extra few points. Right. But then he comes out, he gets that great start, passes Verstappen, which we all knew was going to be exciting considering these guys used to be teammates at Red Bull. And that was one of his former teams, like you said. So to see him come out, take it serious, have a great start, get ahead of Verstappen, and then, like I said, not look back, go ahead and get the win, his 8th win in Formula One, was just absolutely amazing, man. And I was excited to see it. Like I said, he's one of my favorite drivers, a guy that always will bring a smile to your face. He's always got a smile on his face. So I think a lot of us love Daniel Ricciardo, and I think the whole Formula One world is really happy to see that he got this dub. But for McLaren, boy, was this huge, not only in the constructors for them to gain 45 points in one weekend, the most in F1 that any team has gained this year, but also they got the first 1-2 of any team, I believe, this year. So it's just amazing, man. And like you said, the first 1-2 for McLaren in a lot of years. They haven't had this in a long time. And like you said, first win for Daniel Ricciardo going back to 2018. So I think this is something that the whole McLaren team can feel good about. Obviously, all the McLaren fans, and hey, I've been a big fan, and I've said it on the show, of Zach Brown, the team principal at McLaren. So I want to give him some credit for getting the team up here and driving the team back to where they need to be in Formula One. And so they can put out this product of getting a win and getting a P1 and P2 at the Italian Grand Prix. I think it's amazing. He brought up his teammate, Landon Norris. He had an amazing drive as well. But I want to bring up the point. At one point, Landon Norris came on and said, I think I might be faster. I think I'm quicker. And we obviously hear that a lot in Formula One when you want your teammate to move aside and you might want to get a team order for your teammate to move aside. But when I heard that team radio, I said, Lando, come on, man. You're fighting for the win here. And your teammate's fighting for the win. At this point, if you're going to pull off a pass, it's got to be a clean one on your teammate. And then later, I'll tell you what, the maturity of Lando Norris kicked in. The team player of Lando Norris kicked in. A few laps later, he came back on the radio and said, do you want me to hold position? Do you want me to hold station right here? The team came back and said, yes, we do think that would be appropriate if you could just hold P2. And so that's what they did. He basically protected Ricciardo. But, I don't want to say that he gave the win to Ricciardo. Ricciardo rightfully earned it and drove his way up there. But I think at that point, McLaren was saying a 1-2 is a lot bigger for us here going forward in the constructors, especially with our fight against Ferrari. So if we can hold this 1-2 as a team, this will be big for our team going forward. So I think that was huge for McLaren, like I said, for the season and for the constructors, but also big for Lando Norris, I believe, getting his 3rd podium in Formula One. And I'm telling you, he will get that win, and it might happen this season with that McLaren car because it looks amazing, especially with that Mercedes engine. And it's going to power its way, I think, in a few other races here that is going to be up there putting up a fight for Max Verstappen and Lewis Hamilton and Red Bull and Mercedes. So I think you got the 4 top teams right now are clear in Formula One, and that's Mercedes, Red Bull, McLaren, and Ferrari. And we're looking forward to the fight of those 4 teams going forward for the rest of the season.
Yeah, there seems to be a lot of separation between the top 4 and then the rest of the grid, too. I mean, yeah, I think you're right. I think it's those 4. I think we were kind of trying to figure out, is McLaren in that class with the other 3? I mean, obviously it's been Mercedes and Red Bull for all season long, and really for the past few years. Ferrari's just kind of always there. They've just kind of always been in that top part of the grid. And now McLaren, this certainly solidifies their spot there in the top 4. So I think that's a good point as well. So good to see them. It's just good to see other teams, really have a lot of success getting to podiums, especially when it's everybody knows we love Lewis Hamilton. Verstappen, we have a lot of respect for him and as good a racer as he is. When it's always those 2 guys, 1-2, it starts to get a little boring in F1. So when you have McLaren come up and the score of points like that is awesome. So that was good to see over the weekend. Welcome back, folks. We got topic number 7 for you here on Comeback Sports, and that's the Monza Crash Mayhem. It's Max Verstappen, who collided with Lewis Hamilton at Monza, the Italian Grand Prix, very early in the race. Brandon, who was at fault for this crash?
Well, I've got to put the blame on Max Verstappen here, and I've got to agree with the stewards who also predominantly blamed Max Verstappen for the contact here in this crash at Monza with Lewis Hamilton. I really have to think that, Max Verstappen was just really not calculated in the decision that he was making there, or he was calculated in that it was clearly a move to take out his number 1 championship contender, Lewis Hamilton. It was clear, obviously, that, there was 2 different strategies. Mercedes made the right call of putting Lewis Hamilton out on the hard tire and also Valtteri Bottas to start the race. So on the second stint of the race, they would be on the faster medium tire. And, the Red Bulls would have to go to that slower hard tire. So first off, Mercedes outplayed Red Bull right there with getting the strategy call right. And then on top of that, Max Verstappen had an extremely slow pit stop, an 11-second pit stop, which for Red Bull, a team that usually has world record pit stops, as clearly a horrible stop, put them on the back foot. And immediately, I have to think that Max Verstappen got hot under the collar, got really mad, really upset, and then went into that first corner really just pissed off, plain out and flat out and simple, and then made a horrible decision that he was going to basically try to force 2 into 1. And that's exactly what happened. The crash was inevitable at that point, and it took out the 2 championship contenders out of that race. And I know we've inevitably got to go back to it. We compared them to the rivalry, the great rivalry of Senna and Prost before. And this was just like Senna and Prost at Japan. The 2 rivals taking each other out and in affecting the championship in the long run. And I think, obviously, the stewards came to the right decision in blaming Max Verstappen and saying that he was predominantly to blame. And he's now picked up a 3-place grid penalty going forward at Sochi. And, it's arguable if that grid penalty was enough. I personally think it should have been a 5-place grid penalty. And I think that would have been more of a rightful penalty for the decision that he made. And not only that he took out 2 cars out of the race, but he put Lewis Hamilton in an extremely dangerous position with Max Verstappen's car coming over the top of Lewis Hamilton's. And there's pictures where it clearly shows Max Verstappen's tire dipping on the back of Lewis Hamilton's helmet. Lewis Hamilton's helmet even took damage. There's pictures to prove that as well. So the people that are saying that it wasn't that bad of a crash and that there wasn't much danger there, Fernando Alonso, surprisingly, one of the drivers, saying that he didn't think it was that bad of a crash because it wasn't at high speed. But honestly, I hate to say it, you sounded like an idiot, Fernando, because clearly this was a dangerous crash with another car going over the top of another car and having a wheel dip on the top of a driver's head. If it wasn't for the halo, that beautifully designed device that they brought in during the 2018 season, this could have been a fatal crash for Lewis Hamilton. So for people saying that it wasn't a major crash, it clearly was, and it was a very dangerous one. Obviously, the stewards agree with that. They looked at it, they blamed Max Verstappen, and they've given him the grid penalty going forward at Sochi. And like I said, I think it's rightfully earned. But I've got serious concern going forward here for the health and safety of other drivers when Max Verstappen is making moves like this and putting other drivers at risk. And we've got to go back and talk about the history that Max Verstappen has hit other drivers, and it was the running joke in Formula One that you had to give Max Verstappen plenty of room or he was going to take you out. And it's something that has just continued on throughout his career, that he continues to make these decisions. And you have other great Formula One drivers of the past coming out and questioning his decision making. Jackie Stewart just came out just today and questioned his maturity and his decision making, saying that, he clearly made the wrong decision there and is just thinking with a short temper and a short fuse. And then Damon Hill came out and said clearly Max Verstappen is the one to blame there. And Damon Hill said he saw it two ways, that either it was a tactical foul to take out the number one contender in the championship, or that it was just a poor decision in the heat of the moment from Max Verstappen. Either way, full blame on Max Verstappen for this crash from Damon Hill and also Toto Wolff. Obviously, Toto Wolff is the lead principal at Mercedes, so he's a little biased. I totally get it. But I have to agree. I agree with everything that those guys say, and I've got to put full blame on Max Verstappen here. He's a dangerous driver at this point. We've talked about it in the past, how he always expects everybody else to back out like he owns the track. And this is a clear moment where Lewis Hamilton was ahead on track, had every right to that turn, and took every moment of that was played right by Lewis Hamilton, even the pinching of Max Verstappen off the track. You have every right to do that as long as you're not forcing your opponent fully off the track. He gave plenty of room there. Max Verstappen still decided that he wanted to dive in deep and try to force 2 into 1. It was clearly the wrong decision. He ended up forcing the crash, taking both drivers out. I really do think it was a tactical foul by Max Verstappen, just saying, hey, he's going to get ahead of me. He's going to retake the lead in the championship here. I'm not going to let that happen. I'm going to crash both of us out here. So I've got to put full blame on Max Verstappen.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not really sure whether I think he did it on purpose or if it was just a bad decision, like you said. I mean, you know, on the one hand, like you mentioned, he's in first place, and was he trying to take out Lewis Hamilton so neither of them would get points this week? But I'm sure him and Christian Horner and everybody at Red Bull knows something like this could happen, and when a crash like this does happen, where it's clearly his fault, three places in the grid, Brandon. So, do you actually think it was definitely Verstappen choosing to do this?
I do. I really do think this was a calculated decision by Max Verstappen. And like I said, I think you can compare it to the Senna and Prost crash at Japan, where I also think those were both calculated decisions of, hey, I'm going to take out the number one contender here, and neither one of us are going to get points. So the points change, they stay the same. And I keep my lead, my 5-point championship lead. So I really do think either way, I think even if that was a calculated decision, it was a poor decision by Max Verstappen because he put another driver at risk, and he also put himself at risk. And on top of that, a team that's already taken a lot of damage and paid out a lot of damage this year is Red Bull, his own team. And so now he's got more damage to that car, more money they're going to have to pay out. He's got an engine penalty coming forward. They might take it at Sochi. But I've really got to put full blame on Max Verstappen here for this crash. And like I said before, I think it should have been a 5-place grid penalty. So I think the penalty is not actually fitting. I think it should be more.
Yeah, no, I think that makes sense. I think, I know the stewards agree with your assessment too. And I mean, they gave him the 3-place penalty. But he also, they mentioned that he attempted the turn too late. It was at turn 1 and he wasn't close enough to Hamilton to make the trying to get by him, and then they were past turn 1 and going towards turn 2, and that's when he tried to make the move, and he wasn't close enough before, and that's why they gave him the 3-place penalty. So the stewards clearly had, rhyme and reason to give him that 3-place grid penalty for the next race. I guess my question is, if Red Bull clearly knows that they could get this 3-place penalty. Would they intentionally do something knowing that this could set them up poorly for the next race? Because that's exactly what just happened with this penalty.
I don't think Red Bull had no choice. This was all in the hands of Max Verstappen. And you know what I mean? And at some point, it's all in the hands of the driver, and they make the final decision and the final call, whether it's right or wrong. And I think Max Verstappen was in the heat of the moment, like I said, after taking an 11-second pit stop and being put on an alternate strategy that was clearly going to put him, finishing either third or even fourth in the race with the way that the McLarens were running out on track. That Max Verstappen knew, like, this is the only way I'm going to be able to hold my lead is by taking out Lewis Hamilton, or not even taking him out. Let's say that, like, let's give him the benefit of the doubt. But he knew I've got to try to force this situation and force my way ahead of Lewis Hamilton, or he's going to retake the championship lead on me and go ahead and beat me here in this race. So I just think either way, a poor decision and a tactical foul by Max Verstappen here at the Italian Grand Prix.
Yeah, no question. I think you're right. I think it was more just being like over aggressive. Verstappen's always been an aggressive driver. This was above and beyond aggressiveness. And, if somebody thinks that, a tire from a car or a wheel from a car going over another driver's head isn't that serious of a crash. Like, are you kidding me? It's going over the guy's head. I don't understand that at all. So, this was clearly a serious crash. I think Verstappen and Hamilton respect each other, so I don't know if he was trying to hurt Lewis Hamilton, but at the same time, he was trying to get an advantage. He was being, even more aggressive than Verstappen normally is, and I think that's where he got in trouble. And like you said, it might have just been frustration where he just said, "I got to get in there. I gotta try to get by him at this point." It was just horrible timing, and it was a bad decision by Max Verstappen, and now he's going to pay for it with that 3-place grid penalty.
Yeah, quickly before we move on and try to finish out the show here, I think it's one of those things where it's arguable if the penalty's enough and if it's really going to even hurt him at Sochi, a track where Red Bull's potentially taking about replacing their engine and taking an engine penalty and going to the back of the grid anyway. And so he'd kind of take, that penalty would kind of be wiped out by him taking an engine penalty and going to the back. And then he'll have plenty of horsepower to overtake almost everybody there and get himself back to the front. So that's why, to me, it's arguable if the penalty is even enough going forward, that I still think it should have been at least a 5-place grid penalty, and that would have sent more of a message to Max Verstappen. But one thing quickly before we go on that a lot of other people are talking about is, Max Verstappen, when there was that high-speed crash at Silverstone, clearly got out and was kind of complaining and moaning about the celebrations and all that stuff, and about how nobody cared about how he had to go to the hospital and check on him. Well, when he just rolled his car over the top of Lewis Hamilton and dropped his tire on Lewis Hamilton's head, Max Verstappen just jumped out of his car like nothing happened, walked right by Lewis Hamilton's car, did not even check on him, did not care, just started walking back to the paddock, also walked on to the live track where the stewards the track marshals were yelling at him to be like, get off the track, man. You could potentially get killed yourself by getting hit by the cars that are still coming around. So just more poor decision making by Max Verstappen, and clearly a lack of respect for his competitor, not even checking on him after he just crashed him out of the race. So I've got to think, is that respect getting strained at this point going forward? If I'm Lewis Hamilton, that's out the window at this point, and I'm done with Max Verstappen, and I'm racing him as hard as possible to the end of the season. But the lack of respect, I think, is clearly shown there with him not checking on Lewis Hamilton at all and just walking back to the pits and just jumping out of his car almost like, hey, job done, job completed. And that's why I think it was more a tactical foul and a tactical decision by Max Verstappen to take him out. And clearly this is Max walking on the live track, and you had the marshals yelling at him to get back and get off the track. So I just think many, many poor decisions by Max Verstappen. And I've got to say this, and this is one thing that's going to inflame a lot of people, but I call them the Dutch dummy, because he just made so many dumb decisions in that race and put a lot of other people at risk. So, hey, we'll see, but we'll have plenty of comments about it. But, hey, let's move forward and try to finish up this show tonight. Let's move on to topic number 8, and the John Wall and the Rockets deciding to part ways it's come out with rumor has it that John Wall wants to be traded, and the Rockets have given him every right to go ahead and look for a trading partner. So what do you got on this, Pat?
Yeah, I mean, I think this kind of makes sense for John Wall to want to leave Houston. They're clearly rebuilding. They took Jalen Green, number 2 overall, who's considered maybe the best prospect and just being the most raw prospect in the draft, and then they took Sengun, the big shooting big man from Turkey, is sort of a project as well. Green's a little bit more seasoned at this point, but they're clearly rebuilding. As soon as they traded James Harden, you knew they were rebuilding. But with John Wall, I've always liked John Wall as a person. He just seems to be a respectful guy. He had that whole thing with I forget the young girl's name who he kind of became buddies with. She ended up, I believe, dying of terminal illness. I'm not 100% sure, but supposedly he was great in the community in D.C. I'm sure he's probably done some things in Houston as well. And he's doing this respectfully. He's going to Houston. He's going to the Rockets administration saying, listen, you guys are rebuilding. I'm 31 years old. I need to figure out what I'm doing for the next part of my career. I don't really want to be here for a rebuild. So can we just try to find a trade where I can go on somewhere else and then you guys can get something back and that sort of thing? Instead of doing what James Harden did and just show up the season kind of fat and not play as hard. and even though he's one of the best players in the league, he still was lighting it up. But, he's doing it the right way. So I respect John Wall for what he's doing. I understand why he wants to leave. The problem now is at 31 this year, and at 32 next year, he's going to be making $44 million this year and $47 million next year. And John Wall is nowhere near even the John Wall from 2018 with the Washington Wizards, which was when they were taking the Celtics to Game 7 of the NBA playoffs. So, he's not that player anymore. I hope he gets back to the respect I have for the guy. I don't think he will. We just still haven't seen it. There's still some flashes. He can certainly help another team. You wonder if he has sort of like Rose kind of reincarnation of his career like Derrick Rose has as a scoring point guard, very athletic and get up and down the floor, can help be a really good veteran for another team. So that could be the case, but that's a lot of salary to accept for 2 seasons for a team that, would have to give something up, at least a little bit up, to a rebuilding team like the Rockets. But again, I think Wall's doing this the right way. And I appreciate that he's trying to be respectful of the Rockets and respectful of the other players on the Rockets and doing this now rather than, a month into the season like James Harden did.
Yeah, man. First off, I got to say, boy, do I feel old when I hear that John Wall's 31 years old, man. Because I thought he was still in his 20s here. So that's kind of news to me. But I think you're right hearing that it's time for him where he's clearly like, hey, my career is going to be starting to wind down here and I need to be on a team that's going to be competing for a championship. I'd like to go try to get a ring. Clearly you're in rebuild mode and this is not the time. This is not the place for me here. So I want to try to move on. And I honestly think, obviously Wall went there to play with Russell Westbrook and that didn't pan out. And so now he's, Westbrook went out of town and is now playing for the Lakers. And now John Wall is like, well, man, I'm stuck with this rebuilding team and I came here to play with Westbrook and try to win a title. So at this point, I want to go somewhere and try to do that and try to win a title. So I guess the real question is who's going to really want to be trying to make a play for that big contract? Because I think that is the big roadblock here for John Wall. I do think he's still got a lot left in the tank. He's still a valuable player. He's still a very talented player, a great point guard that can score and do it all. But with a contract that's heavy laden like that, especially on the back end, I've just got to question how many teams are going to want to make a play for an older point guard with a heavy contract like that, especially when we're talking, like you said, $44 million for one season. Like, good for John Wall and his agent for signing that and getting that deal signed. I hope he gets to play that out. But I don't know, man. I have many reserves against how many teams are going to want to try to play for that contract. But my question to you is, and you're sending it back, is do you think, I saw producer Ben pop up Dennis Schroeder, who's only making, $5.9 million from the Boston Celtics here. Do you think the Boston Celtics would be still in the play for maybe a guy like John Wall?
No, I think the salary is way too much. I mean, because they're setting themselves up to make a play for either a big free agent or a big sign and trade next offseason. And if you acquire John Wall, first of all, I don't know how they'd even fit him under the cap. I don't know if they have enough. They'd have to give up, Schroeder and a few other guys, probably even like a Marcus Smart to do that. And they don't want to do that. And I don't think Wall's worth giving up even a Marcus Smart or somebody like that. So I certainly wouldn't do it. And again, it's going to affect how you pursue a free agent next offseason or a sign and trade next offseason, whether it's, Bradley Beal or, Zach LaVine's been rumored to be a guy the Celtics might go after as well. If you're trying to go get somebody like that, you can't go get Wall. And then also keep Brown and Tatum too. So I think for the money, I think, he would be a good fit for the team as far as being, he's a distributing point guard who, he's a scoring point guard too, but he would be happy to kind of run the floor and give and create open shots for Tatum and Brown too. I think that would fit pretty well. And with his size and athleticism, he can play pretty good defense for the Celtics team. And, Coach Udoka wants his team to play better defense than the Celtics team. But again, the salary, that's the thing. The salary makes it really tough for a player like him to go play for a contender or play for a team that's kind of in the middle of the pack. Is he going to make a middle of the pack team that much better to where they're a top 4 or 5 team in the Eastern or Western Conference? So it's going to be tough to trade him. It is going to be tough to trade him. He might have to go to another team that is sort of rebuilding, but not quite in the way that the Rockets are, where they might want to just acquire his contract this year and then next year have a $47 million expiring contract they can get off their books, and they can get creative with the cap that way. So, crazier things have happened in the NBA where you never think a guy's going to be Wall was going to be able to get traded, and then Westbrook went to the Wizards and Wall went to the Rockets, and the rest is history. So that sort of thing is probably have to happen again for him to get moved. So we'll see what happens. I just can't think of a team right now that would want to do that. So it's very interesting. Another wrinkle to the NBA sort of offseason, now the training camp. So I'm sure we're going to hear about this story a lot coming up. We're going to move on to topic number 9, and that is Vlad Jr. versus Shohei. We've been saying all year long, we think Shohei is going to win the AL MVP. He's having a historic season, but Vladimir Jr. is hitting the cover off the ball for Toronto. And then on top of that, Toronto's now in second place in the AL East. They've climbed up the standings in the AL East. They're tied with the Yankees coming today, and they're a game ahead of the Red Sox. So right now, if the season ended today, the Blue Jays would have a wild card spot in the playoffs. And, even a month ago saying that you wouldn't think that this was the case, but, after they got some guys back from injury, George Springer was their big offseason signing. Now, the Blue Jays are in a good position here to make the playoffs, and it's because of Vlad Guerrero Jr. So, Brandon, you have a historic, just crazy historic season going on with Shohei Ohtani. Then you have Vlad Guerrero Jr., who's in a good place to maybe even hit for the Triple Crown in the league. So, who do you pick as the MVP?
Man, that's a tough question. But hey, if you're new to this show here, give us a subscribe, give us a like here. We're on a mission to 1,000 subs here on Comeback Sports. So give us a subscribe, give us a like. And hey, we love all of our Shohei subscribers out here. So hey, I tell you what, I'm a Shohei fan, and this is an easy decision for me. But I will say you bring up a great argument for Vladimir Jr. there, especially if he has a chance to win that Triple Crown of hitting. I do think you have to put him in the conversation. But I've got to go with superstar Shohei Ohtani here for the MVP. I think he's been a lock all season, in my opinion. He gained my vote a long time ago with what he's doing just universally. Like you said, historically, something we've never seen in baseball. I mean, they're bringing up the name Babe Ruth. And when you bring up the name Babe Ruth and compare a guy to that, everybody knows, he's arguably one of the greatest baseball players of all time. And you're talking about Shohei with him. So I just think Shohei's done enough this season, whether it be in the batter's box, of course, hitting a bunch of home runs, getting on base, hitting for power, a ton of RBIs. Then, he goes on the mound. He's got like a 1.3 ERA. He's got a bunch of wins on the mound. And then he can also play in the outfield if you need him to. So I just think he's just one of those all-around players that can do everything. We haven't seen this in baseball, like we said, for a very, very long, long time, if ever. So I just think inevitably this guy's the Major League Baseball MVP, and I think it's a lock I just think maybe hey, Vlad's doing a great job of trying to put himself in the conversation, and I think he's going to continue to do that. But I just think if Shohei can continue doing what he's doing down the stretch here, that I think it's going to be an easy lock for superstar Shohei Ohtani to win the MVP.
Yeah, I mean, if I were to decide, that Vladimir Guerrero Jr. should be the MVP, it would be because of where the Blue Jays are in the standings. They're fighting for a wild card spot where the Angels are not going to make the playoffs. It's at this point, they're just not going to make the playoffs. So, that would be the biggest, the deciding factor if I chose Vladimir Guerrero Jr. However, Shohei's having such a unique, we've just never seen this before. We've been saying this all year, but it's true. This guy that can hit with this much power, who can drive in this many runs, who can be that good a pitcher. He's also got 23 stolen bases. So it's, could he be a guy? Would be unreal. I don't think it's going to happen with I think they have 15 games left. So I don't think 30 stolen bases is going to happen. He's got 44 home runs, so he could get close to 50 towards the end of this year. But, I still think you got to give it to Shohei. Guerrero around him, too. I mentioned George Springer, but even Bo Bichette, Craig Biggio. I mean, there's a solid lineup there, which makes, scares the hell out of me being a Red Sox fan and having to see that Blue Jays lineup all the time over the next few years with all those good young players. But, he's got a really good team around him, too, where Shohei, Mike Trout was hurt for a lot of the season, even though he's the best player in baseball. The Angels don't quite have the same lineup that the Blue Jays do. So, Shohei's kind of doing this almost on his own. And then we mentioned pitching, and Shohei's 9-2 with a 3.36 ERA. His whip's 1.1. He strikes 10 guys. It's just so weird to see a guy with 44 homers, 94 RBIs, have those kind of pitching stats. It's just crazy. And then on top of that, he's got 23 stolen bases. So I just think because of the uniqueness of the season, we would look back on this season and say, how did Shohei not win the MVP? Whereas if we look back on the season and say, why did Vlad not win the MVP? You'd say, oh, because he was in the same season as Shohei Ohtani's crazy season. So I think that's why I would definitely pick Shohei, even though I always try to look at the standings and see who's carrying their team into the playoffs. But the Angels aren't so bad. They're 4 games under 500. It's not like they're an abysmal team. They're not so bad that you're just giving the MVP to somebody whose team is just absolute garbage. So I would still give it to Shohei Ohtani, kind of for the same reasons you said. This is just such a historic season. We've just never seen anything like this before.
Yeah, I think inevitably if Vlad Jr. finishes second, I think he's got nothing to be upset about there with that. I think especially finishing to a historic season with Shohei, I think you'd have nothing to be upset about. It might even be a little asterisk there that, normally he probably would have won the MVP if it wasn't for the season that superstar Shohei is having. And just, flat out before we go on, I know all of our Japanese subs who they want to win, and that's clearly superstar Shohei Ohtani, and I'm with them right now. Lock him in for the Major League Baseball MVP on my vote. Let's move on. Let's finish out this show tonight. Let's move on to topic number 10. And that's Ronaldo becoming the top international goal scorer by scoring 110 goals in international play. So becoming the top men's international goal scorer. And that's just amazing. And it just seems like Ronaldo's been breaking history a lot over these last few months here.
Yeah, no question. Him becoming the top international goal scorer. I think he's got, 110 goals now internationally. And that's just crazy. He's only 36 years old. It's not like he's, towards the end of his career. He's going to have, I would say, at least 4 or 5 years left playing international soccer. So he's certainly going to add to that total. To just kind of put it in context, Lionel Messi's 34, so he's 2 years younger than Ronaldo. He's got 79 international goals. So he's 30 goals behind Cristiano Ronaldo. So, and he's the other top player in the world right now in soccer. So just to put it in perspective, the next guy in line, I can't even pronounce his name, Ali, and I can't pronounce his last name. He was an Iranian soccer player who just retired, I believe, back in 2000 or so. He was 37 or 38 when he retired. So he was a year older than Ronaldo is now when he retired. So that just shows you that Ronaldo, if he just keeps going for a couple more years, he's going to put this record so far out. It's going to take so long for another player to reach that mark because he's going to get so far ahead in the goals scored context, where he's in first place now, and then the first place is going to be so much further ahead than second, season fifth. He'll probably jump up to fourth or third pretty soon. But it's just amazing how he's only 36 years old. He seems like he's been around forever, and he doesn't seem like he's slowing down one bit.
No, man, we said it on this show in the past. He's like a wine. He's just aging and getting better with age and looking better and still playing the exact same at the highest level that he can. And so I've always said, obviously the two best players in the world are Ronaldo and Messi, but I personally would have to pick Ronaldo. I just like his game a little bit more. I like his brand a little bit more. I like the way he carries himself a little bit more. He's just a little bit more of a showman compared to Messi, who's more of a reserved and quiet and shy type of guy. I totally get it. But I love Ronaldo. I love Cristiano Ronaldo. And like I said, he's been breaking records here a lot over the last few months. So this is nothing new. And it's just fitting for him. It really is. He's, I think, arguably one of the best soccer players all time and ever. And, and you have to put him up there with the likes of David Beckham, Pele, right, and some other great soccer stars, international players. But for him to say that he's got the most international goals now, I think is huge, for his resume to say that he is one of the best players of all time. And like you said, you brought up Messi, the current other guy that's the top dog here, and he's about 30-something, 34, 35 goals behind. So I think that says a lot. Obviously, they both still got a lot left in the tank, but he's got a lot of catching up to do if he wants to get up there, Messi, as far as the number of goals that international that Ronaldo's got. But it was also great to see Ronaldo. Obviously, we covered it going back to Manchester United. Wanted to say Manchester U and United at the same time. But it's really one of those things where even in his first game back there, he scored a goal back. And so it was good to see this guy coming back to Manchester United and the Premier League, scoring a goal in his first game back, and then going and scoring a 110 international goal pretty much within the same couple of weeks here. It's just pretty amazing. And it just shows that he is still clearly at the top of his game. And like we said, just getting better with age.
Yeah, no question. You start to wonder, is he going to be like, Tom Brady, where Brady's now got 7 Super Bowls, he's trying for 8, and how much further is he going to go with Super Bowls where it's just going to be unattainable for other quarterbacks? Is Ronaldo's international goal scoring going to be at a certain point where it's just in a different stratosphere? That could happen. The guy's only 36 years old. Still got a lot left to play for here in international soccer. So this will be fun to watch for the rest of his career. Folks, I want to thank you so much for joining us here on Comeback Sports. We appreciate all the patience here tonight. We've had some technical difficulties for the live stream. That stuff happens sort of out of our control. Certainly not the fault of our awesome Ben Kudo, who's been working tirelessly to put this show together, folks. So now we're going to take a quick look at our chat right now because we've had some fans check out the chat throughout the night. So, Brent, I think you have a better sight line of this chat than I do. So if you want to take a look at the chat and just let us know, pick out some of the favorite parts of the chat, and we can talk about it for a little bit.
Well, we had Roosman Reese on there, and he's clearly a big F1 fan along with us. So we really appreciate you, Roosman, joining in. And hey, give us a sub, give us a like. I'm sure you are because you're here. But he was commenting in a lot throughout the show, and especially during our F1 topics. And he said he's a huge McLaren supporter, and he's saying McLaren definitely deserved that, and rightfully so. And I've got to agree with him. And he also said, that, generally Lando was really happy genuinely for Danny Rick. And I believe that. I think that's a great combination of team players there. But hey, Roosman Reese, man, thank you for tuning in and thank you for commenting here tonight on the show. And we appreciate you, and definitely tune in next week because we will keep delivering some top F1 content for you. But just quickly, I've got a little bonus topic, right? We want to talk just a small bonus topic, even 10 seconds of your time. And that's the Manning broadcast, the Manning cast on Monday Night Football. Like I said, I really enjoyed it. It was pure comedy, but you also got a lot of football knowledge, X's and O's, from not only Peyton Manning and Eli Manning. So I just got to get your thoughts quickly on that, Pat.
Yeah, I think hopefully ESPN does understand that their Monday Night Football broadcast hasn't been very good. It's still not very good with the guys in there. They're not bad. I have always liked Louis Riddick, but, it's just the broadcast itself is just kind of blah. But then you throw that as an option over on ESPN2, ESPN Plus. And I think it's a brilliant marketing move by ESPN. Heard Manning on Bill Simmons' podcast last week, and there was some talk, will Manning be the Monday Night Football color commentator or Sunday Night Football? Is he going to join one of those teams? Manning doesn't want to travel. He doesn't want to be traveling all around the country doing these games throughout the season. So he can kind of sit at home, hang out with his brother. And then they brought in Russell Wilson during this one. I'm sure they're going to have Brady on at some point, and probably some of the younger guys, Mahomes, Josh Allen, or whatever. And it's just cool to see a guy like Manning who's sitting there, especially in the game that we saw where the Raiders came back and won. And even when Derek Carr threw that interception in overtime, and he's looking at the game going like, oh my God, I can't believe it. He's reacting just like a fan, which is cool to see. Hated Peyton Manning was on the Colts, but it's a lot of as an analyst, because he knows exactly what he's talking about. Very entertaining. His brother's a little, obviously it's Eli. He's a little more like subdued and a little bit more boring, but the two of them together, it's a cool thing to watch.
Yeah, I love those two together. I think, like you said, it's two different personalities, and they mesh so good together. Obviously, they're brothers. They've been around each other a lot. But I like Eli. I got to tell you, I think he's a little bit more dry humor, but he threw a couple of shots out at his brother Peyton, and one of them especially was like, "Hey, you need a little bit more makeup on your forehead there, Peyton. It looks like you sprayed Pam all over your forehead." And I was just crying, laughing. So it was just really one of those things where, like I said, it was not only pure comedy with those two and the two brothers, and like you said, Russell Wilson, and they even had Travis Kelce on there too. But also you got a lot of football knowledge and a lot of ins and outs and X's and O's from not only a player's side, but they talked a lot about the coaching side of it too. So it's just definitely something that they said they're bringing it back next week for the next Monday Night Football game. And I'm definitely going to be tuning in to watch those two again. So if I'm ESPN, I think I've got to have those two together for the rest of Monday Night Football. And like you said, it just makes sense that they can do it kind of like we're doing our show at home. They can do the show and tune in and watch the game together and just have a fun time doing it. So I think it's a no-brainer for ESPN to continue it. And a lot of fans are actually saying, can we please get them for the college football game of Tennessee versus Ole Miss to have that as a Manning cast too? I think that would be an amazing game for them to call too. And I'd be looking forward to that as well.
Yeah, that would be very interesting. I'd love to see that. Those two would be going at it for a game like that as well. And Peyton even mentioned on the podcast with Bill Simmons that he never has really watched a game with his brother since they were like 12 years old, because then Peyton went off to college, and then Peyton was the NFL, and Eli went off to college, and they were playing kind of at the same time at certain points. So this is when they've been able to actually watch an NFL game together. Sort of in the same space. So that's probably a pretty cool feeling for those guys as well. So yeah, I would definitely like to see that throughout the rest of the season, and college football would be great too. So hopefully that happens, ESPN. Hopefully you do the smart thing this time. Good to have options for you when you're watching a broadcast of a game. Folks, thank you so much for joining us tonight on Comeback Sports. Again, you're watching us on YouTube. Go to the Comeback Sports YouTube channel, hit subscribe. Make sure you subscribe to us on YouTube. All the content from this show will be filtered right to your account, right to your subscription, and then you can just check it out. You don't got to go searching for it. Again, you can also follow us right at the bottom of your screen. Brandon and I Twitter handles are right there. And again, during our shows every Wednesday night at 8 o'clock, we'll have that number at the top of your screen, and you can call into the show and also go on the live chat. We read some live chat from some of our loyal subscribers. If you want a live chat, you want to ask us a question, you can jump right in there. We'll get you on. We'll get your question on the show. Thank you so much, folks, for joining us tonight on Comeback Sports. We'll see you next time. Have a good week, everybody.